We're back. My apologies for that. We had some technical difficulties there. Brian Kelly broke the stream, broke the recording. We'll try to let that not happen again, but we won't get to that other clip because I feel like it's going to break the system again. Ooh, boy, we're holding this thing together with duct tape, folks. But so we were talking about LSU. In this LSU game, where LSU came short 27-20 versus the USC Trojans. So, yes, like I had said a moment ago, this defense has improved, but the whole team, they're not all the way there. And I still have LSU having a pretty good season, but, I don't put them above a team like Tennessee, for example. I think Tennessee is going to have a great 10-2 season. I think LSU is looking at maybe a 9-3 if they manage to beat a team like Ole Miss. That'll be a really big statement win that'll kind of wash the taste out of their mouths from this past week. But that's like the tough. That's the tough thing about it. And you're losing to a team like USC, and it's not the end of the world. You still have a chance to fight for the battle for the SEC. It's one of these things where, like what I was talking about with Virginia Tech and Vandy just a moment ago. Yeah, like you lost this game, and you wasn't expected to lose it. But it's a non-conference game. You still have a chance to fight for your conference. And for LSU, they just have to put that behind them and look ahead because the future is bright. You just have to make it happen. And Brian Kelly's obviously upset, and he was upset at his team. So it didn't appear to me that he was really 100% throwing his team under the bus, because he did take some. He said he's got to be a better coach. So he took some accountability there. So that's good for him. That's USC and LSU, but I want to move on to this Miami and Florida game. This, the first showing of the new CBS, SEC on ABC. See, CBS is nothing but a memory to the SEC. And I know it's sad. And I know we're all sad. I know I was sad watching that last, that last game for the SEC on CBS. But look, we've moved forward. ESPN wants control of all, if it wants control of everything. They're going to have the SEC for a while. But I will applaud them. I think ESPN, for the most part, has done a pretty good job of making it feel different, making it feel special. We have the opinion that we have on the music that they remix, that they chose to include as the theme music for the SEC on ABC. But other than that, the presentation was good. I thought the on-screen graphics, everything, it felt like it was shot different than other ESPN programming. And I like that they did that, because they could have went lazy. They could have made it look like every other, ESPN, college football game with maybe a few extra, graphics and logos thrown on there. But they didn't do that. They made it completely look different, feel different. Obviously, it didn't sound different, because obviously you have, like Joe Tessitore, for example, on this ball game. He's an ESPN guy, right? And that's just going to be what it's going to be. I like Joe Tessitore. Is he and Jesse Palmer, are they going to be the commentators for every, 3:30 Eastern kick? I don't know. That's to be determined. That's for them to decide and for me to have to just deal with, right? Because we can't control this. We're just the consumers of the media. But anyway, it's about 150 degrees in Gainesville, Florida on Saturday for the Florida Gators and the Miami Hurricanes. Miami Dolphins, Miami Hurricanes, what's the difference, right? Two teams that were great at one time, that have struggled, that people think, oh, they may be back. No. But looking at the rest of the ACC so far, Miami could be like the contender for the ACC this year. They came in to Gainesville and they absolutely put an extreme whooping on his Florida Gators team. And Billy Napier, he's got it worse than I thought. 41-17 was the final score in that game. We're going to take a look at some stats before this stream breaks again. And we're going to try to pull this up, and maybe this will work, folks. But let's take a look at this. So Cam Ward for Miami, as you see, he went 26 of 35, 385 yards, 3 touchdowns, and he threw 1 pick. Meanwhile, Graham Mertz, oh boy, 11 of 20, 91 yards, no touchdowns, but 1 pick. That's pretty bad. I do not think Graham Mertz is. I don't think he's going to cut it for this Florida Gators team. He, I think you maybe have to make a change. We see there DJ Lagway came into the game. He was 3 of 6 in his few snaps for 31 yards, but he threw a pick as well. Oh man, this is it's tough. Montrell Johnson Jr., though, he made some things happen. 11 carries, 106 yards, 1 touchdown. You had Treyon Webb scoring a touchdown as well for Florida. On the other side, Mark Fletcher Jr. Scoring 2 touchdowns. And as we move on to the next piece of stats here that I have, you see the story on the receiving side of the ball. Florida receiving a whole lot of nothing. Eugene Wilson III for 7 receptions, 50 yards. Badger and Jackson both having 4 receptions and 56 yards total just between the two of them. But at Miami, Xavier Restrepo, 7 receptions, 112 yards, 1 touchdown. Jacoby George, 2 receptions for 25 yards and a touchdown. And Cam McCormick, just 1 reception for 9 yards, 1 touchdown for Miami. And the team stats, as we take a look here, as I zoom that in, 3rd down efficiency. Florida only getting 1 first down on 3rd down of 9 attempts. Miami was 50-50. They went 5 of 10 on 3rd down. Total yards. Oh, is that right, folks? 529 total yards for Miami. 261 for Florida. That's total yards. 385 of those were passing for Miami. Only 122 passing yards for Florida. 144 rushing yards for Miami. And pretty even there, 139 for Florida. A moral of the story, Florida couldn't pass the ball. They could barely run it. The line was terrible. 2 turnovers for Florida, 1 turnover for Miami. Oh, man. I mean, what more can you say? Could you hear the pain in my voice when I was reading off those statistics? You know, we're talking about a Florida team here that hasn't been good for a while. This is an undisciplined team, and that is something that's been apparent to me for at least a couple years. I know last season it was very apparent. Just an undisciplined football team. Billy Napier does not have control of his program. His players are not all on the same page. They don't. It doesn't appear when you watch Florida play that they really care, that they're really, all in for each other. They have these discipline issues. They have these issues with penalties. And it's more of the same that we've seen from Florida. They haven't improved any. They may have even gotten worse. Preseason, I had Florida going 6-6, and I had Billy Napier's job safe for another year. I didn't think they was going to fire him. If he got to 6 wins like I had predicted, they could still win 6 games because, honestly, I had them losing to Miami. I already had that predicted. But I still had them winning six games, and a couple of those, I don't know anymore. But with that being said, even if you're a Florida fan and you thought, okay, I feel like we might lose against Miami. Miami's a good team. They could really battle for their conference. They're tough. Even if we lose and we show improvement, of course, if you're a fan, you never want to lose. But if we show any kind of improvement, maybe that we've turned over a new leaf, that we've improved, that we've taken that next step, that we're not fading into obscurity, then maybe I'll have a little bit of faith for this season. Maybe that we can begin to right the ship. That didn't happen, folks. If anything, it was worse than what it could have been. I mean, this game, Florida, what did they score again? 17 points. 41-17. You got beat in your home with that ruckus environment at the Swamp. The place was packed. You had Tebow there. You had all these stars there. You had SEC Nation there. I mean, you had all these things in place. You had the first SEC on ABC's time slot. Everything was in the palm of your hand, and you didn't just blow it. You just completely annihilated it. It's going to be a tough season for the Florida Gators, for their fans, and for boosters, for the players. You think they're undisciplined and you think that they're not all in for each other now. What happens when they get to the second half of the season, and regardless if Billy Napier's still the coach or not, if they're down bad, when we get deep into SEC play, it could get really ugly down in Gainesville before it gets any better. And I hate to see that, but that's the way it is. Now, Miami, on the other hand, if we take a look at the rest of the ACC, Clemson, maybe not as good as we thought. Virginia Tech, maybe not as good as we thought. Who else is there? Florida State, way worse than we could have ever imagined. There's some other contenders there, but I would say that Miami is in a good spot. They should be confident in where they are. They should be confident in what they could be able to do this season. This game right here means nothing for them in their battle for basically that first round bye in the playoff. But Miami, we could be talking about them in the 12-team playoff this season. That's kind of apparent from what we saw out of them this Saturday. But let's move along from that Miami-Florida game. Let's move on to another game. Pretty good game. College Game Day was there in College Station, Texas, for Notre Dame and Texas A&M. And let's go ahead and jump right into the stats for this game as well. It was the battle, Riley Leonard versus Connor Wagman. So Mike Elko takes over this program from an extremely rich Jimbo Fisher, getting richer every single day. But at some points of this game, especially towards the end, I wondered if Jimbo was still coaching. Maybe that's a little bit of a harsh thing to say. But let's take a look here at the stats from this game. Riley Leonard, 18 of 30, 158 yards. No touchdowns, no picks. Connor Wegman, 12 of 30 for 100 yards. 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The rushing game, that's what it was all about here, on this day at least for these two programs. Jeremiah Love for Notre Dame, 14 carries, 91 yards, and a touchdown. And Jadarian Price getting a touchdown on 8 carries and 44 yards. And on the other side, Le'Veon Moss, 20 carries, 70 yards, and 1 touchdown. And they handed him the rock 20 times. And as you can see right there, Connor Wegman himself getting 26 yards. 9 was the longest for him. E.J. Smith also got 4 carries for 24 yards. Mari Daniels, 5 carries for 20. Looking at this in a little bit more detail, 31.8 quarterback rating for Connor. Oh, that's a tough day at the office for sure. Riley Leonard, a 66.7. Again, receiving was not the... it was not very popular in this game. But what I will say as we take a look at the team stats here, physical game. It really was a physical game. You could see on third down, Notre Dame was 2 of 12, and A&M was 4 of 13. 356 total yards for Notre Dame, 246 total yards for A&M. That's 158 passing for Notre Dame versus 100 yards passing for A&M. 198 yards rushing for Notre Dame, 146 for A&M. Penalties. Notre Dame had 11, which added up to 99 yards. Texas A&M had 6, which added up to 55. They had 2 turnovers. And in this ball game, that's a difference maker. They were fairly even on possession. Notre Dame had the ball 31 and a half minutes. A&M had it about 28 and a half. So that was the story from a statistical aspect on this ball game. Physical game, A&M, it looked like they were going to take it there. And then Notre Dame just got the better of them. Texas A&M kind of blew it there at the end. They allowed Notre Dame to score, allowed them to score again, and that was it. And it all happened in a short amount of time there at the end of that ball game. Pretty entertaining game, honestly, for the majority of it. And this is a game right here. Much like that LSU game, these games were kind of similar in the fact that they're defensive heavy games, maybe offensive struggles. Honestly, the thing about this game was these two offenses kind of did struggle. The thing about the LSU USC game, those offenses were better. The teams were more even. The defenses were good. But in this ball game, it was about defense. And it was entertaining. And it was physical. And it was exciting to watch for the majority of it. And like I said, Notre Dame just got ahead. And they got this victory. And Notre Dame continues on. And, this is an incredible win for them. Because they are not in a conference. You have a Power 4 win against an SEC team. Do we have to pull up Notre Dame's schedule? We may do that here in a moment. So we'll just pull up their schedule. We'll go through it here live. So Notre Dame, pretty much all that they have is a at-large bid, right? Because the highest ranked, highest 4 Power 4 champions get the bye week, get the first 4 spots in the new 12-team playoff. So Notre Dame, because they're not in a conference, they don't get that luxury. But for them, it may end up being perfectly fine for them because it may end up being maybe a blessing to them. And honestly, I have their schedule pulled up here. If we take a look at Notre Dame's season, obviously they have that game there that they just played versus Texas A&M. Next, they're going to play Northern Illinois. Then they'll go to Purdue. Then come back home and they'll play Miami of Ohio. Then Louisville. Stanford, Georgia Tech, Navy, and then they have to play Florida State, which honestly, by that point, Florida State might not even be ranked. And then Virginia, and then Army before ending the season at USC. So, and the majority of these games appear to be at home. It looks like there are some, as it says here, neutral site locations for the Navy game, the Georgia Tech game, and the Army game. But look at that schedule. And sit here and tell me that an SEC team couldn't go undefeated without much hiccup in this kind of schedule. If you're Notre Dame, is the fact that you have to be in a conference because you have to win the conference championship to go to the playoff and have the a chance to get the first round bye, top 4 spot. Is that really worth it? If you can continue to play a schedule like this, because they have the partnership with NBC to broadcast a lot of their games. They don't need a conference in that way. They make a lot of money. They're a huge brand. Honestly, I don't think they'll ever join a conference. And honestly, why should they? Meanwhile, Texas A&M is, look, I can't make a good enough judgment on Texas A&M. They're still doing pretty well recruiting. If Mike Elko is able to, and it may take a year or two, actually take the recruiting classes, the money, the NIL that they have, and if they can actually, do something with the players that they get, mold them into what they're supposed to be, we could be talking about Texas A&M in the next 2 years, maybe competing for an SEC title. That's kind of a stretch. It was not a good first game for Mike Elko. I guess something that they can, kind of like with maybe LSU, something you can hang your hat on. You competed with a very good team for nearly 60 minutes. That's something, if you're A&M, you can hang your hat on. But they have a lot of work to do, and it's a long season ahead for the Aggies. For Notre Dame, they'll probably, I can see them jumping Ole Miss, even though Ole Miss won 76-0 over an FCS opponent in Furman. I could see the AP putting Notre Dame over Ole Miss. Look, it may not be right, but I have no say in that. That's for them to decide. That's for the coaches poll to decide. But let's move on to some excitement here. The Vanderbilt Commodores under Clark Lea. Oh my goodness. They get the victory. And if you watch that game, which I didn't get to watch a whole lot of it, but I caught the parts that mattered. And I especially watched the end of the game. So, here's what happened. Vanderbilt goes up big early, right? So, and I'll pull up this for you so you can see the quarter by quarter breakdown. But Vanderbilt came out, firing on all cylinders, and that's something that you rarely see at a Vanderbilt. Something that don't even sound right. So, Here we go. So Vanderbilt starts out and they score 3. All right, I'll pull this up for you so you can see it.
4th down.
So Vanderbilt scores 3 in the first quarter. They score 14 in the second. So they go into the half winning 17-3. Then they score 3. You know, and Virginia Tech comes back, right? They come back and they get ahead, or they tie the game, right? So it's tied 27-27. Vanderbilt sets himself up for a field goal to win the game right there at the end. And I guess you could call it a chip shot. Is missed. They go into overtime, and I knew that when Vanderbilt, based on what I saw with Vanderbilt's defense in this game, I knew that Vanderbilt was going to score first. I knew they were going to stop Virginia Tech, and they did. The final from Nashville, Tennessee, 34-27. They get a victory over one of the ACC hopefuls in Virginia Tech, Clark Lee, in this program. This was a major boost for them, and especially coming, early in the season. You've got, a couple games here coming up that you have, every chance to win. And I don't think it's overnight Vandy's going to shock the world. I have them going 5-7. More so maybe 4-8, but I think they could go 5-7. They could go 5-7 now. Yeah, I just took a look at it. I had them 4-8 because I had them losing to Virginia Tech. So they could go 5-7, and you have just one more shock away from them being in a bowl game. Clark Lee has done a lot of work to this team. All right. He took from New Mexico State, picked up large chunks of New Mexico State's program, shipped them over to Nashville, Tennessee, dropped them right there on that stadium. Right there, the stadium that they're renovating, and it's going to look good when it's done. And that's including their quarterback, which is going to be maybe a deciding factor in the future of Vanderbilt football. Diego Pavia. Let's look at these stats from this game, both for Virginia Tech and for Vanderbilt, and we'll start there with Virginia Tech. Kyron Drones, 22 of 33, 322 yards, 2 touchdowns. He threw 1 pick. And the man, Diego Pavia, 12 of 16, 190 yards, 2 touchdowns. If we take a look at the rushing there for Virginia Tech, Tootin had 9 carries for 34 yards and a touchdown. Diego Pavia himself, 26 times he took a run. He got 104 yards doing so and 1 touchdown. His longest run was 27 yards. Cedric Alexander had 17 carries for a total of 69 yards, and he had a touchdown as well. So we look a little bit, into depth of these stats. Kyron Jones out there, you can see 58.1 quarterback rating. Diego Pavia, 82.6. He really made things happen, and it's a breath of fresh air if you're a Vanderbilt fan, or really if you're a fan of the SEC, because honestly, we all want Vanderbilt to be successful. Because when Vanderbilt's successful, yes, I mean, they kind of get picked on as the team that, okay, we have Vanderbilt on their schedule, automatically going to write it in for a win. I know that's not fair, but that's how it's been for a long time now. It's fun to see Vanderbilt be competitive. The team stats in this ball game, they both had a pretty close number of first downs. Virginia Tech had 21. Vandy had 20. Virginia Tech was 7 of 15 on third downs. Vandy was 5 of 12. Total yards, pretty close. 397 for Virginia Tech, 371 for Vandy. And you can see not that many penalties, honestly. Like when you think about some of those other games that we covered, Virginia Tech had 5 that equaled to 40 yards. Vandy had 6 that equaled to 65. No turnovers for Vanderbilt. That's another big plus to look at. Vandy had the ball 34 minutes. Virginia Tech had it for 25. So I'm going to address something here. So on social media, on TikTok and specifically, some people were wondering why I had predicted Vanderbilt to beat South Carolina later in the season. I just thought I would address this right here, right now, and clear this air. Even before this week, like I said, preseason, I had Vanderbilt beating South Carolina in Nashville. After this week, it's even more apparent that that's going to happen. I saw something in Vanderbilt, and I should have saw it when I was picking this Virginia Tech game, because like I said, I had Virginia Tech beating Vanderbilt. I saw something that Clark Lea was doing and taking a lot of initiative, basically throwing everything he can against the wall, hoping something sticks, because honestly, what does he have to lose except his job? Obviously. But that's incentive to do all you can. If we look at Vanderbilt and what they're doing, what Clark Lea has done in doing all this stuff, getting New Mexico State's quarterback, running their offense, basically getting their offensive coordinator from there to come and run this new offense, as well as Clark Lea taking over defensive play calling duties. That's something else that's very interesting. Usually you don't see that out of a head coach. Clark Lea taking that into his own hands, and that made a big difference Saturday. It really did. And let's look at South Carolina and their struggles against Old Dominion. 23-19 was the score. They struggled. I mean, that's an understatement. They struggled at home versus Old Dominion. They managed to get out of there with a victory. It's ugly. Will the ugliness continue for South Carolina? I don't know. But Shane Beamer is in a tough spot. And honestly, I thought Sam Pittman was in a bad situation. Shane Beamer is in a tough spot there at SC. And now everybody is looking at, after what Vandy did Saturday, everybody's looking at Vanderbilt's schedule. They're looking through it. All right, they could win that game. They could win that game. Oh, South Carolina. That's a good possibility. That's what everybody sees. Everybody sees it now. People on TikTok were wondering, you have South Carolina losing to Vanderbilt. Yes, I absolutely do. And today I stand firm on that more than ever. Now, on the flip side, now that we've handled that, I had a little bit of fun with it. Because yes, I had Vanderbilt beating South Carolina. But I had South Carolina beating Clemson, the in-state rival, at the end of the season. That may have been stretching it a little bit, okay? Maybe a little bit of silliness from Brandon to come up with something, so silly like that. Look, that's a prediction. You hope if you're Clemson that you not, you don't get to the point where you lose to South Carolina at the end of the year. Now, crazy things happen. Crazy things happen every season. But, Clemson could be vulnerable at that point in the year. They could be some injuries away from being even worse than they are now. their depth, they have an issue with depth. We saw it Saturday versus Georgia. You know, we've talked about here on this show, Dabo. We talked about it last year because he was really adamant about the transfer portal and not wanting to use it, not really caring about the transfer portal NIL stuff. He's complacent. He's content with what he is, his philosophies, and I respect that. I really do. Look, Clemson's doing really good in the old traditional sense of high school recruiting and things like that, and they're making that work. But here is where a team like Vanderbilt can jump ahead of you. Vanderbilt, believe it or not, has NIL. I've read some reports and some analysis from certain people that said Vanderbilt even has their NIL in a better spot than South Carolina does. Vanderbilt can afford to do some stuff. You see what they're doing in the transfer portal now, what we've been talking about for the past few minutes. Vanderbilt could end up could compete with a Clemson. Not saying they could beat Clemson. They could compete. South Carolina could compete with Clemson. South Carolina's not as stable of a program, at least at this very moment, that Vanderbilt is. Look, it's silly to say South Carolina's going to beat Clemson at the end of the year, but look, if it happens, I'm going to look very smart. If it doesn't happen, well, I just made a silly pick. We're a long way from that point. There's a lot of football to be played. There's a lot of, wacky things that are going to happen between now and then. But I stand firm on both of those predictions. Vandy is going to beat South Carolina. South Carolina is going to beat Clemson. And I'm nervous about that second one. But speaking of Clemson, they played a game this Saturday. They played number 1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs, a team that still has veteran quarterback Carson Beck. You don't have a Ladd McConkey. No. He's in the league now. You don't have a Brock Bowers at tight end. He's in the league now. But you have Nate Frazier, Dylan Bell, you got Landon Humphreys, Aiden Smith, and a slew of other players out there that are good. You still got an offense and defensive line that are very good. A defense that makes some stuff happen. And on the flip side, what does Clemson have? They sure as heck don't have much of a running game. Let's take a look at the stats from this ball game here. As you can see, Klubnik for Clemson, 18 to 29, 142 yards, throws a pick. And rushing-wise, basically, they had one rusher, Phil Maffa, 16 carries for 59 yards, no touchdowns. Pretty ugly showing on the ground, and you compare that to what Georgia did. Nate Frazier with 11 carries, 83 yards and a touchdown. Cash Jones had a carry for 15 yards and a touchdown. He had Dylan Bell carrying the ball. Carson Beck himself carried it 3 times for 19 yards. But really, receiving kind of was the story for Clemson. It's really all they had. Antonio Williams had 6 receptions for 76 yards. And that's really, he was the only playmaker they had, really, on the whole team. Taking a look at Georgia here. London Humphreys had 2 receptions for 63 yards and a touchdown. Arian Smith had 5 for 56. And Lawson Lucky, 2 receptions, 37. And it kind of goes down from there. Team stats, first downs, 13 for Clemson, 19 for Georgia. Clemson was 4 of 13 on third downs. Georgia was 4 of 11. 189 total yards for Clemson, 447 total yards for the Georgia Bulldogs. 278 of that was passing for Georgia. 142 yards passing for Clemson. And, rushing was ugly for Clemson. 47 yards on 22 rushing attempts. That is 2.1 yards per rush. Georgia had 169 rushing yards on 27 attempts, 6.3 yards per rush on that one. Penalties. Georgia had quite a few. We're talking about 7 for 70 yards. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Something breaking news here, folks, but Clemson went 3 of 15. That is 3 penalties, averaging or equaling to 15 yards. Sorry, I'm a little flustered here. 1 turnover for Clemson. Possessions, as you can see right there, 27 minutes for Clemson and 32 for Georgia. The Bulldogs continuing, this is just a start. This is really an appetizer for what they have to come this season. I still have Georgia going 12-0 in the regular season, probably winning the SEC, going on, and probably at least going to the semifinals for the college football playoff. I'm very high on Georgia still. And until they show us anything different, until they show us that they can, that they have vulnerabilities, that their line, their offensive and defensive line, gets beat play after play after play, if we find that their secondary is getting beat deep, and that's just a fraction of the team. But until we find that they have vulnerabilities, and if we, Carson Beck, and another thing about him, if we see his vulnerabilities, we haven't really seen any vulnerabilities from Carson Beck. Sometimes I question a quarterback when he is on a good team like Georgia. People get mad at me for this. But you want to say Carson Beck was only as good as his position players. Carson Beck has a good chance this year of proving all those people wrong, proving things that I've said personally in the past wrong. If he can, really show that regardless of what team is around him, he can make these plays. He can make these incredible throws. He can have awareness, pocket awareness, but, as well as reading a defense, being able to put the ball exactly where it needs to be, regardless of who's out there. And he competes for a Heisman. Then I'll say, bravo, Carson Beck. You deserve every bit of praise you've ever gotten. He has a test this season. I think he's going to do just fine. Honestly, I do. But I think we're going to really see what Carson Beck can do this season. For Clemson, I have no faith in them whatsoever. I have no faith that Dabo can get back to that same level that he was a few years back. I don't see Clemson making it to the ACC championship game. Well, they could. Some people have them as a favorite as well, like they had Virginia Tech as a favorite, like some people have Miami as a favorite. Right now, Miami is my favorite, and they should be your favorite too, to at least make it to the ACC championship game. But right now, I've got to see some more out of Clemson. They've got to do better than that because that was terrible. Another thing I will say about Georgia, they do lack, and this is across the board with college football, it's just the current landscape, but they lack a little bit of depth. They may not have as much depth as they have had in past years, and this goes for Alabama, this goes for all the big dogs. Look, NIL and the transfer portal has thinned the herd a little bit. You got more players going to other teams. You don't have players basically stuck in a program. Look, they're still deeper than a lot of teams, but they're not as deep. Does that make much of a difference for a team like Georgia? No, it doesn't. but I expect them to continue to be dominant this year. And we're eyeballing that matchup versus Ole Miss in Oxford right there in the beginning of November. We're eyeballing that game. That's going to be an incredible showing. Man, I can't imagine the atmosphere because we're looking at two teams that very well could be undefeated. You know, Ole Miss could have struggles in Baton Rouge before that game, but that could be a turning point for either of these programs. But success out of Georgia, more of the same for Clemson. I just have no faith in them going forward. A little bit of breaking news as we are live here, folks. Mike Norvell and the Florida State Seminoles falling to Boston College right here on this Monday night, Labor Day, 28-13. I'm going to see if I can pull up some stats for you here. A little bit of information on the fly. This is unprecedented. Florida State coming into this year after what they did last season. They didn't lose a game last season, all regular season. The quarterback goes down. They miss the playoff. They get absolutely annihilated by the Georgia Bulldogs, and they haven't been right since. They lose 28-13 versus Boston College, and this is after losing 24-21 to Georgia Tech. So right now, Florida State at the very bottom of the ACC, they're already 0-2 in their own conference. Georgia Tech is at the top. They have 2 wins, 1 win in the conference. Boston College has 1 win in the conference. 2 contenders already. Who would have thought Boston College could do something? You know, I remember last season, I remember covering this game, and you can go back and on our YouTube channel and take a look at this, but I remember talking about the Boston College Florida State game from last season. It actually took place up in Massachusetts. If you remember that game, Boston College, they almost beat Florida State. They almost had them. Florida State ended up prevailing and winning that game, but I knew, that Boston College team isn't bad. They didn't get it done, but they wasn't bad. This season, they go to Tallahassee, Florida, and stomp. I mean, stomp Florida State while they were already down. Good for them. And as we look at the ACC right now, you got newcomers, California, for example, and, a few others. It could be interesting. Stanford. It could be interesting. There may be, it may end up the cards may fall in an unexpected fashion. It may end up going in a direction that we didn't expect. Let's look at the box score on this game tonight while we have it. And I'll pull this up close for you. So, Thomas Castanelos for Boston College went 10 of 16, 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. DJ Uyunglele for Florida State, 21 of 42, 272 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 pick. Yeah, it's actually not, we're talking about 50% passer rating there, 50% completion rating, 272 yards in that bad of a loss. Oh boy, what went wrong? Receiving, you see right there, Florida State. Let's see how many people? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different receivers catching passes for Florida State. 7 for Boston College. Wow. What went wrong with this game? And what's going wrong with Florida State? Some of you people that may have watched this game, you could chime in. Florida State is, oh my goodness. Who do they have next? This is wild. Oh no. So September 14th. So honestly, this couldn't have came at a better time. It appears that Florida State is getting a bye week. They get an early season bye week. September 14th, they play Memphis, a team that's going to be competing in the American Conference. I'm telling you, Memphis is a great team. They won 40-0 over North Alabama. They got Seth Hennigan there at quarterback, and he's already put up some pretty good numbers. It's his 4th year in this Memphis system. He's already thrown for 308 yards and 2 touchdowns. So Florida State's got to play Memphis, like I said, their very next game. Then they play California. That's another conference game. They play SMU, another conference game. Clemson, oh my goodness, another conference game. Then they play Duke. They have to go to Duke. Then they play Miami. And then they end the season versus North Carolina. They play North Carolina. Then they play Notre Dame on November 9th, Charleston Southern, and then they have to play Florida. And who knows, that game right there, I think I joked about this. That may have been another game, but I had heard somebody on the radio, this is what it was, say Florida and Florida State. Wouldn't that be something if both of these teams, it won't happen. Mike Norvell's job is safe regardless of, even if they don't win a game this year. But imagine Florida and Florida State plays with interim coaches. That'd be funny. That'd be sad, really. Florida State's down bad. That's tough to see. You hate to see it. But before we get out of here today, let's move on past that breaking news. You can see it right there up on the screen. They're talking about it on ESPN. But I want to talk about Mississippi State. I want to end the show with Mississippi State because their story. And Ole Miss kind of can tie into this as well. Because the crossroads happened there in 2019, the 2019 Egg Bowl, where Elijah Moore does the fake dog pee celebration after scoring a touchdown versus, they're in the Egg Bowl, into which they get a 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. They miss the extra point, lose the Egg Bowl by 1. Mississippi State already ready to fire, kind of, both the administration and the fans were kind of getting ready to get rid of, their coach. And he didn't do bad, but, I think they just they didn't like how it was going, right? For Ole Miss, you had a interim coach that had an interim year and then was hired on and had 2 seasons. And the only thing that saved him one of those years was the victory in the Egg Bowl, Matt Luke, after Hugh Freeze's shameful exit from the program. So both coaches are gone. Ole Miss, on the back of athletic director Keith Carter, takes a big leap of faith. Hires Lane Kiffin, this guy that has had this checkered past, that's had some good things he's done, but he's done a whole heap and lot of bad things. He's had a lot of bad experiences. Is he trustworthy? Is he good for our program? In all things considered, it was a risk. We see where Ole Miss is now. Okay. Well, the Pirate Mike Leach gets hired Mississippi State, and they have, they struggle. It was tough. It was a tough time. As we all know, Mike Leach passed. And after, really a debacle of epic proportions with their next hire, they ended up getting Jeff Lebby. Jeff Lebby, a guy that is known for running high-powered offenses, a guy that was at Ole Miss and ran, high-octane offenses there. He comes to Mississippi State. And this is why I want to talk about Mississippi State. There's a lot of hope in that program right now. There's a lot of hope for the fans because they won this game big. It's exciting to see them put up 56 points versus Eastern Kentucky. And I have the Bulldogs going 5-7 on the year. But I'll tell you this right now. If they manage to win 6 games and go to a bowl game, we're talking about possible SEC Coach of the Year award for Jeff Lebby. Mississippi State has a chance to overexceed expectations because right now you got a new coach, you're trying to turn over a new leaf. You really don't have anything to lose, honestly, because nobody is expecting you to be great. Nobody's expecting you to win over 4 games this season. So really, the only way to go is up. They're probably going to be the underdog in the majority of their games. They're going to be the underdog in the game this Saturday in our old buddy Zach's backyard, Arizona State. They got to travel there all the way to Arizona State, and ASU so far is a 6.5-point favorite. But if you manage to win 3 games, if they manage to beat Arizona State, which would be a great victory, Power 4 opponent, and then if they beat Toledo the very next week, we're talking about going in to this home game versus Florida in week 4, and you might have a chance of upsetting Florida. And obviously the road gets really tough. They got to play Texas at Texas. They got to go to Georgia. Welcome to the SEC from the head coaching position, Jeff Lebby. It may be a little bit different. It has to be different being an OC in the SEC versus being a head coach in the SEC. But then we're talking about Texas A&M in Starkville. You never know. They have a chance. Texas A&M, if they can't get their act together, well, you could be looking at a win there too. Arkansas, Sam Pittman in Arkansas is in a lot worse position, honestly, in my opinion, much like South Carolina is. They're likely in a worse position than Mississippi State is, and right now it's apparent. Arkansas, they're a team that I have zero hope in. I have less hope in them and have had less hope in them than I have in Florida. Mississippi State plays Massachusetts at home next, and they got to go to Tennessee, another very tough away game. They'll have Missouri at home before they go to Oxford to play the Ole Miss Rebels in the Egg Bowl. They have a chance of winning 5 games. They could upset one of these teams and win 6, but what I'm saying is don't overlook Mississippi State this season. And even if they don't, end up having a lot of success, look for them to be back in the running, be back at least in the middle of the road in a season or 2. If you're a Mississippi State fan, you should be excited. much like Tennessee. If you're a Tennessee fan, you should be really excited because I think they're going to do a lot of special things this year, more so than LSU. But what more can I say? Folks, that was college football week 1, and it is over now after Boston College beats Florida State 28-13. So week 1 right here officially ends live on the Ride Along Sports College Football Week 1 reaction show. Thank you so much for joining us here. We've been going for a very long time. You can catch us in audio format on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and probably whatever podcast app that you choose. This probably works just as well. You can catch us on TikTok. We have an Instagram. We have an X account as well. That you can go on the YouTube feed here. We have some shorts, and we have not just lives, but we have videos. I want to do more live videos, but, I'll play it by ear. Hopefully 2 a week, folks. But I thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Brandon Taylor, and as always, I hope you have a great rest of your week. If you're just now starting your week tomorrow, remember, folks, 4-day week this week. It's a whole lot better than 5 days, so you can hang your hat on that. So catch us again later on in the week as we take a look ahead to week 2 in college football. The ball just keeps on rolling as we go on into the future. So thanks again. My name is Brandon Taylor, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.